Natural disasters could strike at any time and anywhere, and there's only so much that we can do to prepare for them. While our abilities to forecast them continue to improve, in the end, it all boils down to an educated guess. In one instance of such a guess, a prediction was made that on January 4th, 1973, a giant earthquake, big enough to destroy all of San Francisco, would occur. Despite its good intentions, this forecasting would bring with it highly unusual unintended consequences in the form of human sacrifices. As a seemingly normal teenager, Herbert Mullin tragically lost a friend in a fatal car accident and began hearing voices in his head a year later. Mullin spent the next few years in and out of mental facilities on his own accord, and in between his stay, he'd pass the time using LSD and amphetamines, which some believed to be the reason for his worsening mental health. During the summer of 1972, it would appear that Mullin made some effort to find a community of sorts, but after being denied by an art collective in San Francisco, Mullin, now 25, moved back in with his parents. All the while, the voices in his head had become more consistent, some of which suggested that the only way to prevent an imminent natural disaster was through the act of killing. While continuing to go in and out of mental facilities, Mullin was eventually diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia. His behavior became increasingly disturbing, and Mullin's parents looked into getting him institutionalized. But at the time, California's mental health system experienced major operational setbacks due to budget cuts by then-Governor Ronald Reagan. Without limitations and medication, Mullin was free to do as he pleased. Unlike those who worked to anticipate natural disasters, Mullin took it a step further and decided to try to prevent them. Claiming that he was chosen by Albert Einstein to carry out the plan, he set the wheels in motion to stop the impending major earthquake predicted to hit on January 4th, 1973. Mullin was guided by the belief that a minor natural disaster avoids a major natural disaster. And so, the killing spree began. On October 13th, 1972, Mullin's first victim would be Lawrence White, who was traveling by foot near Highway 9. When Mullin caught sight of White, he pulled over, popped open the hood of his car, and pretended to inspect the vehicle. White saw what he thought was a man in need of assistance, but when he approached to lend a hand, Mullin bludgeoned him to death with a baseball bat. 11 days later, his second victim would come face to face with her killer. Mary Guilfoyle was hitchhiking to an appointment she was late for when Mullin spotted her near Cabrillo College and offered her a ride. She climbed in with the notion that she would make it to her destination. However, the car would never come to a stop before Guilfoyle would take her last breath. While in motion, traveling down a busy street, Mullin managed to stab Guilfoyle in the heart. Mullin went on to dissect the body before dumping it in nearby mountains. Mary Guilfoyle's body was found months later, reportedly so badly decomposed that signs that she had been murdered were not apparent. Mullin believed that he informed his victims telepathically that it was okay to kill them via a die song, and in return they expressed their willingness to die through communication, ultimately claiming them as the human sacrifices needed to stop the earthquake from taking place. On November 2nd, 1972, at St. Mary's Church in Los Gatos, California, Father Henry Tomei and Pastor Richard Howley were sharing a meal when a knock on the church's door revealed a man seeking the service of confession. Allowing Howley to finish his lunch, Father Tomei offered to help the man. Whether a confession was made or not, Father Tomei's body was found an hour later with 3 stab wounds in his chest, with Mullin claiming his third victim. At some point during his spree, Mullin attempted to join the U.S. Marines, but an observation of his peculiar demeanor and his refusal to release his criminal records caused him to be dismissed. And in December of 1972, Mullin purchased a .22 caliber handgun to continue his mission. January 1973. As the 4th approached, locals prepared themselves for what might be one of the biggest natural disasters to date. Some were planning to escape the city for a while others flocked to purchase earthquake insurance policies as a means to protect their assets. On the day of the highly anticipated earthquake, the sun would rise and set over San Francisco, making January 4th, 1973 just another ordinary day in the Bay. Mullin believed his work had been successful, thus continuing his killing spree. Soon after, on the 25th of January, Mullin set out to locate a former high school classmate, Jim Gianera, who is said to have been the first person to supply Mullin with marijuana. Mullin believed Gianera started a movement to ruin his mind. After trying to reach Jim in his last known residence, Mullin learned from Kathy Francis, the woman who answered, that Jim had moved elsewhere with his wife Joan. Francis provided Mullin with their new address, where he would show up to take the lives of both Jim and Joan. But he didn't stop there. Returning to Gianera's old home where Kathy Francis, the woman he spoke to earlier, now resided with her 2 young sons, he stabbed and shot them all, claiming their lives too. Mullin would later state,
Gianera spearheaded a movement to befuddle and confuse me.
February 1973. At Henry Cowell Redwood State Park in Felton, California, not far from the Mullin family residence, 4 teenage boys hanging out around a campsite found themselves in the presence of a serial killer. While hiking in the area, Mullin was once again singing the die song when he fired shots at the 4 teenagers, making Mullin's human sacrificial count now 12. Before leaving the crime scene, Mullin found a rifle at the makeshift campsite and took it along with him, where it would wind up being the murder weapon used in his final kill. February 13th, 1973. Driving through Santa Cruz, Mullin took notice of 72-year-old Fred Perez gardening in his front yard. Seemingly without hesitation and in broad daylight, Mullin boldly pulled into Perez's driveway, exited the vehicle with rifle in hand, aimed and fatally shot Perez in the chest. Of multiple witnesses to the crime, one neighbor, Joan Stagnero, was able to get Mullin's license plate and called the police. Some minutes later, the plate of the vehicle was identified on the road and was pulled over, bringing Herbert Mullin's 4-month killing spree to an end. Accepting his fate, Mullin was arrested without resistance, and he exercised his right to remain silent. After searching his apartment, police found evidence tying Mullin to the other murders that had taken place. Among the evidence were newspaper clippings of his recent murders, Gianera's address, and a rosary pouch belonging to Father Tomé. Mullin confessed to killing 13 people and was eventually charged with 10 counts of murder, initially pleading guilty and no contest to a judge. But the judge could not accept his plea because he had yet to receive legal counseling and was determined to be incapable of representing himself due to lack of competency. On the first day of his trial, Mullin now pleaded innocent by reason of LSD-induced insanity. Due to Mullin's change of plea, California courts broke protocol for the first time in history by judging the defendant's sanity before the trial started, rather than after the verdict. Mental health experts involved in the case examined Mullin, all arriving at an agreement that Mullin did indeed suffer from mental illness. However, they were also able to determine that Mullin was fully aware that his actions were illegal. Because of this distinction, the court deemed him sane. Mullin was found guilty and convicted on all 10 counts of murder. 2 counts in the first degree for the premeditated attacks on Jim Gianera and Kathy Francis, and 8 counts of second-degree murder. It wouldn't be until later that he'd be convicted for killing Father Tomé, and he was never officially convicted for the last 2 of his confessed murders. Herbert Mullin received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2020. But got his first parole trial in 2011, where District Attorney Bob Lee successfully fought to keep him behind bars. The parole board extended Mullin's sentence for 10 years, thus becoming eligible for parole again in 2021. In the end, the idea that wreaking havoc stops havoc is much like the adage, 2 wrongs don't make a right.